All right, we are back with another deck guide, and I'm excited because I haven't done one yet for this particular format. Basically, calling this the format of the Bastion, because if you don't already know, the last patch, Bastion, got a huge buff to add +1/+1 permanently, as well as a permanent spell shield. So, pretty damn good now. But I wanted to go ahead and take the time to go through the Lee Sin deck. So, as always, my name is Justin, also known as Shit Just Works, and today we are going to go through the Lee Sin deck, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Usually I do 2 games. I go through the deck, and then I do 2 games. I'm going to go through the deck still, but I'm only going to do 1 game, but I'm not going to speed it up. I usually speed up the 2 games so you get a sense of 2 different matchups, but I prefer, I think, and let me know in the comments below as well what your thoughts are, to just go a little bit more in depth as to the decisions I'm making throughout the game, as opposed to just trying to just explain the deck in general, because it's kind of hard to follow the game, right, when it's sped up, because you got to talk a little bit faster. Now, definitely used to that casting, but I want to provide a little bit of a different, more educational content for you guys, so you guys understand how these decks work just a little bit better. So that's what we're going to do. So without further ado, we're going to get into the deck first. Lee Sin, Targon, and Ionia. This thing is, OTK is so good. All right, so the infamous Lee Sin deck. Whew. Okay, so a couple things I want to explain first is that, first off, there's a lot of different ways to play this deck. So just as a general thing, this deck is the celestial version, I guess you could say, where, you are playing Spacey Sketcher, you are playing, the Solari Priestess as well to get some of those celestial cards. There are plenty of other ways to play this, even just that don't even have Celestials in it, right? I mean, there's a ZED version, right? This does not even play ZED. The version I'm going to go over is just playing the Lee Sin. So with that said, this is primarily the pretty common version, I think, for playing the Celestials alongside everything else. And we're going to go over why that is and why, actually, originally I did not like the Celestial. I thought it sucked. I didn't like it. I actually didn't play it until I started playing it so that way I could do a video for Lee Sin, and I actually ended up liking it more than the ZED version, to be honest with you. I don't like the ZED version now, so this is probably my favorite way to now play Lee Sin. I think it's the better version now that I've actually had some time to play with it. So, with that said, we have, so we got some one-drops here. Gift Giver, is a 2 of, again, a lot of these cards, let me, disclaimer, any of these cards could be in any of in this deck. This is something that I've talked about on cast a lot as well, where nobody can seem to agree on exactly what cards go in this deck. But personally, so Gift Giver really provides some early game defense versus some of those aggro decks. Obviously not fearsome aggro, but anything else, pirate aggro, it does okay with. And obviously gets you that gem. I'm not crazy about running all 3 because then it kind of bogs up your hand. You get a little too many 1-drop. Spacey Sketcher. This is where the Celestials come in. Freaking awesome discarding gems, right? You get 3 gems off of Mentor of the Stone. Feels good to discard 1 to Spacey Sketcher. Obviously, you can use the gems to buff something like Lee Sin, but generally speaking, you're going to want to, or you will be at least discarding 1 for a Spacey Sketcher. Now, what can you get? Well, Moon Silver is, because again, Spacey Sketcher, remember, only gets 3 or less. Moon Silver, really good. I'm looking over here because I'm just double checking to make sure the cost of the cards. Moon Silver is probably one of the better ones you're going to get. The Charger is good just as an additional blocker if you are going up against aggro. It just gives you that other unit, as is Serpent. Serpent will be able to pull you something with that Challenger. Moonglow, also incredible. It gives something Spell Shield. So if you're trying to protect something like Eye of the Dragon, like a Mentor of the Stones, or more importantly, probably a Lee Sin, Moonglow, pretty damn good as well. Crescent Strike, I've also found myself grabbing in a lot of games just to kind of stall out for those extra couple of turns and live, so you can get that Lee Sin combo off. Because at the end of the day, the point of this deck is to get a big old Lee Sin up to at least 10, give it Overwhelm, and bam, your opponent's dead in 1 turn. I don't think we do 20, I think we do 18 in this game, but you get the point, right? Beyond that, Behold the Infinite, I also forgot to mention too. That's obviously also an invoke card as well. That Beyond the Infinite will invoke anything. Solari Priestess will be 4, 5, or 6. Now, with Solari Priestess, we'll go through first, because this will essentially bring us through all of them. Solari Priestess, Written in the Stars, generally you're going to want to grab because it'll get you your Lee Sin faster. Now, that's if you don't have a Lee Sin. If you already drew a Lee Sin, you don't necessarily need to grab Written in the Stars. You could even grab a Traveler so you can invoke something bigger. If you're aggro, Meteor Shower might help. Challenger might help as well. Or sorry, the Warrior. I always want to call him the Challenger. And Falling Comet, Silver Sister. Golden Sister is the one you actually pull. So there's a lot of options with the 4, 5, 6. Generally, it's just to make sure you draw your Lee Sin. So this basically, Solari Priestess gives you another option to guarantee drawing Lee Sin. And generally speaking, you will be able to get a Written in the Stars. There's not, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6, right? So you have like a 50% chance of getting it. So now, beyond that, the top end, obviously, as we know, is just the big old bad units with elusive and stuff like that. There is a space with this deck to win the game solely with an elusive unit. It's the same idea as Lee Sin, where you're dealing all that damage in one turn. You can just as easily get something like an Immortal Fire that's buffed up, like a Great Beyond that's buffed up, and get it up to, 15 attack, depending on what your opponent's Nexus health is at, and just swing for game, especially when you have something like a Bastion or Deny in hand to prevent them from really doing anything about that elusive unit. So just kind of keep that in mind in certain matchups where you will be able to squeak a win through with that elusive unit. So it's another reason why these Celestials, I've actually grown to like them, because they also offer an alternate win condition, as they do in basically any other deck, because you can always pull the Great Beyond and just wreck your opponent, right? Pretty standard stall tactics. We have the Eye of the Dragon to kind of double down on all of these spells that we have. Behold the Infinite, Guiding Touch heals more. Guiding Touch, a lot of the times you're going to want to heal a unit. You want to keep Eye of the Dragon alive. Great. You want to keep something like a Lee Sin alive? Great. We have the Deep Meditation in here to pull even more spells. Obviously, 3 Zenith Blades. Great. There are people arguing to only play 2 Zenith Blades. All right. This is an argument since the beginning of time. I like all card games. I get it. Do you actually play all 3 of the card that searches itself? Because you don't want to bog down your deck or whatever. Here's my input on that. If you don't want to play 3 of the card, you probably don't want to play it anyways if it searches itself. Like, if you don't want to play 3, why would you want to play 2 to get the additional card? Because you're already thinking that it's not good enough to play 3. Is it even good enough to play 2 at that point? And then, obviously, 1, it's not even worth it. So, I think you play 3. Especially this deck, Overwhelm, you kind of need that with Lee Sin. And right now, the only way that you get Overwhelm in this particular version of the deck is Zenith Blade. So you do need to draw a Zenith Blade if you can. And then obviously, again, Lee Sin, when it does Dragon's Rage, when he is leveled up, Dragon's Rage, for those who don't know, recalls the unit. When a unit is recalled as a blocker to a unit that has Overwhelm, all of the damage still gets pushed. It's like having a 0 health blocker, plus the Dragon's Rage effect kicks in. So if you have a 10 attack Lee Sin, it Dragon rages straight to the, I don't even know how to say that, straight to the Nexus for 10, and then it does the Overwhelm damage on the attack for an additional 10 for good old 20 damage. So, and also, it's something to note, his buff with the Lee Sin Sonic Wave is very nice for this deck. It's this was such a great change for his champion spell. It's amazing, especially because of this Resonating Strike, where if you have another Lee Sin in hand, sometimes that'll give you the additional 2 attack that you might need on your Lee Sin to buff him up when he's leveled up to get that Overwhelm damage through and actually just OTK her. With that said, without further ado, the gameplay. So let's go ahead and get into this game of Lee Sin Targon. Just only Lee Sin. No Zed, just Lee Sin. All right, so it looks like the game that we got is actually, I totally forgot about this. So this is actually kind of a mirror match. The opponent, though, is playing the ZED Lee Sin. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to prove me right that this deck is better than the ZED version, which I wholeheartedly believe. So basically what we want to do for the mirror match with this mulligan, which is why we kept the Solari Priestess, so we want to try to keep anything and everything that's going to get us our Lee Sin that much faster. When you're playing a mirror match, I mean, and generally any matchup, right? Like, you just want your Lee Sin as quickly as possible. If you're able to get your Lee Sin down on turn 4, that is absolutely amazing. But in this matchup in particular, if you're able to get your Lee Sin down first and leveled first, you're likely just going to have the tools to win the game, because you can just, if it's even down for 2 attack turns before your opponent gets a Lee Sin down, that's going to be 2 Dragon's Rages to face, and it's probably going to be, too much for your opponent to overcome. So you need to get that as quickly as possible. The Eye of the Dragon and Gift Giver attacking here doesn't even really matter, right? Like, there's no world that they're going to be able to beat me down with something. Now, granted, they have Zed, right? You do have to worry about Zed being a thing. If they are able to get a hugely buffed up Zed as quickly as possible, that's going to be an issue. So I'm going to have to deal with that Zed somehow, probably by, buffing something up with these Pale Cascades in hand. So that's kind of what our opponent's game plan is, right? It's to get a Zed on the board if they don't have a Lee Sin, because they are likely to draw into a champion a little bit faster than we are, which gives them a little bit of advantage here early on. But we have these concussive palms. We have tools to be able to kind of stave off any of that aggression as it does come down. Electric Fuzz is playing the rat. I forget the rat's name. The gem dude. All right, Mentor. Mentor. He, because he's probably going into a turn 4 with a Lee Sin, right? I imagine we're going to see a Lee Sin come down. He's going to try to attack with the Mentor and the Lee Sin. And we actually just drew our Lee Sin as well too. So this is really good. So even if our opponent does play a Lee Sin, we're not out of the game yet because we do have our own. We will be able to kind of trade back and forth. It looks like they do have it, right? So this is what you want to set up as well. I mean, that's kind of why Mentor of the Stones is in the deck. You want to be able to attack with Mentor, buff up the Lee Sin. In Electric's case, he wants to buff up Lee Sin or Zed because a buffed up Zed with Mentor of the Stones is just as good, you might argue, right? I mean, that's why Zed is in the deck. It provides a little bit more early aggression for our opponent than we might have. But we do have more tools like this, which will be able to shut down this Mentor being able to attack here. So basically by stunning the Mentor, even though, yeah, sure, the Lee Sin might be able to attack and might be able to challenge something with this gem, we get the gem used. Not a big deal. It at least doesn't get any heal. But we prevent the +2/+2, which is the biggest thing that we need to worry about here because we cannot allow this Lee Sin to level up. So another thing that we want to, not level up, just get a lot of value at this point. And one of the things that we want to be aware of is Hush. And I'm not sure if the Zed, and again, there's so many different ways to play this deck. Like, I'm not even actually sure if the Zed version is going to have Hush. This is ladder. Who knows? They might be playing it, they might not. We do know that we are playing one copy of Hush. So that is potentially going to come in huge later on in the game, especially if we have these Lee Sin just kind of trading back and forth. Like, looks like it'll probably happen here. Now, I do have the advantage now where I have the Mentor of the Stones down, and I might be able to get down the first attack with this Lee Sin. It feels bad because I don't have any spells. Like, I haven't been able to get any gem generation going on yet. So I could have played the Solari Priestess there to kind of bait something else out. The problem is, if I play the Solari Priestess, I'm not getting any value out of that Mentor of the Stones by attacking with anything, really. Like, I don't want to buff up this tail or buff up the Solari Priestess. And that's just going to feel really bad. And it's going to feel even worse if I just attack, because my opponent at that point will then just be able to buff up their entire field, and it's not going to be too hot. Because I was going to attack with the Mentor of the Stones, but because my opponent passed back and kept 5 mana open, I went ahead and took the opportunity to go ahead and burn some of their mana, which I don't mind there. I mean, that kind of equals out the value of not being able to get that Mentor of the Stones attack off, so we'll see if that helps here in a little bit. As far as this Zenith Blade, this is exactly why Zenith Blade is so good. So Zenith Blade in the mirror match, and I mean, if you're ever playing a Lee Sin deck and you have, as an Ionia deck, deny, you are denying Zenith Blade. You are denying Zenith Blade. You deny it. You do not let that go through. There's really, the only other great deny targets is if they do play Concussive Palm or Will of Ionia on your Lee Sin. The Zed version, I am partial to believing plays a little bit less of those as our version would play. Now, the other thing is also Celestial cards, if there are some bigger Celestial spells that come down. In this case, we know that the Serpent was already grabbed, so that's kind of a good advantage for us already knowing that. Now, this is great that we have Pale Cascade that also triggers Barrier. So what this does for us, and Pale Cascade is so good. Pale Cascade is amazing. So right here, this is going to force out some sort of spell by Electric because we're not blocking the Mentor of the Stones either. This spell is going to do nothing but give the barrier to Lee Sin. So basically it's just wasting a spell. If they do have another Pale Cascade, which, yep, there's another Pale Cascade, they at least sustain the value. So they're not losing card value. But they do lose the mana. So they're not going to be banking through spell mana. and they do lose that one Pale Cascade in that trade, which is good. You always want to kind of keep track of how many Pale Cascades your opponent has. Since this card has come out, Pale Cascade, oh my god. Like, especially in this matchup, you need to be playing around Pale Cascade every single turn. As long as your opponent has additional Pale Cascades in deck, or that they haven't played yet, you need to kind of be playing around that. It can swing turns, it can swing games, it can go in for lethal too. And with Lee Sin, obviously it goes without saying, if you do have that overwhelm on Lee Sin, it becomes super, super big. Now, I want everybody to look at this board for a second. One would think that our opponent has the advantage, right? I mean, they have two mentors on the field. I can't necessarily do anything about these mentors unless I challenge one of them with this Lee Sin. And they just have a wide field. They have a bigger Lee Sin than us too, right? Like this Pale Cascade even is not getting the Lee Sin up to where we need to put it, right? So what we're trying to do, instead of worry about these Mentor of the Stones, instead of worry about really anything else, now that our Lee Sin is buffed up 7/7, we need to bait something out to try to remove this Lee Sin. So you can see here, we actually set it up where we're going to take a lot of damage onto our Lee Sin. It's going to go down to 1. I don't mind because I have the Guiding Touch in hand. I can at least heal him up a little bit. So this does force out the 2 spells from Electric to go ahead and put that barrier on the Lee Sin, and we get the perfect feels good hush off. And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, where you need to try to go for the hush on the Lee Sin mirror match. And honestly, I think I'm playing 2 hushes in here. This is kind of why there's 2 hushes in the deck as opposed to 1. I know a lot of versions will play 1. I mean, hell, there are some that play 3 as well. Obviously, it's good in that it gets you an additional spell. It synergizes with Lee Sin, so you can play it twice in 1 turn. But it's just so powerful versus Lee Sin. Hushing a Lee Sin is great. Now, hushing a leveled up Lee Sin, not so great. And that's one of the reasons why we might not see it as a 2 of or a 3 of as often, because if your opponent is open attacking with a Lee Sin, or if we're even open attacking with Lee Sin, the Dragon's Rage goes on the stack prior to us really, or prior to having the ability to hush it. So you can hush it after the fact and maybe get rid of some buffs or something like that, but it won't matter because that Dragon's Rage is still going to go ahead and go off. So here we just kind of got to really play with our life total a little bit. I do think we need to end up blocking. It could be, so one of the things, so again, actually speaking of Pale Cascade, we're pretty close to taking lethal here. We have the Deep Meditation, which is good. Excuse me. And we have 2 Guiding Touch to fall back on now. We had 1 initially. The 1 would have got us over the hump. We would have lived at 1, I think. And even if we play it now, we live at 1. The problem is Pale Cascade. So you see, we're at -1 if we take this all here. If our opponent has a Pale Cascade, then we just lose. If we only play the Guiding Touch, right? We just lose the game, which is going to feel really bad. So we do have to go ahead and block something here. I actually think I slightly misplayed this because by doing this, 2 Pale Cascades, I think, wins the game for my opponent. And we only saw 1. Now, I mean, the chances that my opponent... Actually, no, only 1 Pale Cascade. Or no, sorry, I could have still Guiding Touch. So yeah, 2 Pale Cascades would have won the game for my opponent, which the chances they have that as the exact last 2 cards in their hand is really low. But, I mean... If you really wanted to play safe there, you probably should have blocked one of the Zeds just to avoid taking as much damage as possible. But I wanted to make sure we got rid of the Mentor of the Stones, which is really the last big offensive threat that our opponent has. And we have plenty of tools in our hand. We have all the tools in our hand to go ahead and be able to win this game. And that's the advantage that this deck has over the Zed version. We have so many tools to... not just stave off aggression like Eye of the Dragon. I mean, obviously Electric has Eye of the Dragon as well. We see it on that side of the field, but we just have more ways to protect Lee Sin, more ways to activate Lee Sin. We're more reliant on the Lee Sin combo, whereas Electric is less reliant on Lee Sin combo. So they're deciding to go in on this Zed. That's probably not the best decision in all reality. We have Will of Ionia too to possibly return that Zed to the hand. We also have obviously Lee Sin that can go ahead and challenge the Zed and just get rid of it. But now we do have the Zenith Blade, and this is why we play 3 of it. You also need to draw, like, forget tutoring for the next Zenith Blade. Like, you need to draw it to get this combo off. Like, right here, We need it so that we can increase the attack of Lee Sin so he can actually win the game for us. And yeah, and then this is why you usually get Crescent Strike. So I actually mentioned Crescent Strike as a Celestial that you want to take, but we have the Deny. Knowing that our opponent only has 2 cards left in hand, I'm actually pretty positive with how they've been playing too. They didn't deny some of the previous spells that were played, that they wouldn't have a counter deny to that. And yeah, I mean, that's all she wrote at this point. We have the barrier. Unless there's a concussive palm or a Will of Ionia, we end up winning the game by challenging this Zed here. And feels good, man. Feels good doing 18 damage in 1 turn. Oh, wait. What did they play here? Okay, yeah, it didn't matter. So, yeah, and again, Will of Ionia, concussive palm would have felt really bad there. The game definitely would have kept going at that point. And it would have also negated the Dragon's Rage, because, again, if the unit's not on the board for the Dragon's Rage, it's not going to actually kick the unit. So, but yeah, no Zed Lee Sin is the better Lee Sin. All right, and there you have it. That is the Lee Sin deck there. I hope you guys enjoyed kind of that slower, a little bit of slower gameplay with the decision-making in between some of those turns as well. If you guys do like that, let me know in the comments below. I can try to go a little bit more in-depth as to card choices and stuff. I can even pause the game at certain points and kind of go over, you know, why I'm making some of the decisions that I'm making and different card reads that I might have on my opponent and stuff like that. So definitely interested to see what you guys prefer. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. As always, everybody, stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you. And peace out.